On this episode, we each pick 2 bits of advice that we should have listened to back in our early days, but didn't.
So, if you want to avoid the mistakes that Greg and I made as punk youngsters in Bangkok, you'll love this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 to learn how to play takra, but after long consultation with my knees and spine, have decided to just watch it at Benjakiti Park instead.
Probably a good idea.
Yeah.
And I'm Eddie Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a 1-year teaching contract 21 years ago. Fell in love with the drama and excitement of sitting on tiny plastic chairs designed for people half my weight, directly next to streets with out-of-control drivers. And I never left.
Classic.
Classic Bangkok experience. We want to say a quick thank you to one of our patrons, Christine Howes, who supports us at the show's shout-out level. Stick around after we're done talking about smart advice that we stupidly ignored as young punk expats, to hear why we are definitely going to get Christine to be the Bangkok Podcast chauffeur when she's in town. We want to give a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons got a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our ad-free regular show a day early, emails with behind-the-scenes photos of our interviews, access to our Discord server to chat with me, Greg, and other listeners, and various other goodies. But best of all, patrons like Christine also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and Bangkok topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about my imminent return to Bangkok, hopefully, and my adventures navigating the Thailand pass system, plus a bit of a discussion on nostalgia and how much an extended trip home chips away at your identity as a Thailand-based expat. To become a patron, head to bangkokpodcast.com/support.
Right on. Okay, Ed, I think it's probably prudent for us to let our regular listeners know what we've just discussed in detail with our patrons, but it seems like you're free to go, man. You're coming back to Thailand.
Yeah, as our patrons already know, I tested negative earlier this week out of the blue, and I am planning on returning to Thailand. I should be there by the time we record the next show, so I should be there by Tuesday or Wednesday, and I'm a bit nervous because I'm still afraid. Like some like I forgot to like check a box on some form, but if there are no disaster strikes, I will be back in the land of smiles.
Right, you touch down, they'll be like, oh, it says here you ticked the I prefer quarantine box, so off you go.
That's quite possible. That could happen.
Yeah, but it was in Thai, not English. Ooh, yeah, well, sorry. Should have thought of that. Should have thought of that when you moved here 21 years ago.
That's right.
All right, well, good luck, man.
Thank you.
Okay, on this episode, we are looking ahead to hopefully a bright future where people will be thinking of visiting and moving to Bangkok once again. So Ed and I were discussing this, and it got us thinking about how this is going to result in a whole new crop of residents and expats in Bangkok, which brought us back to our own early days in the kingdom. Now, like many young punks, we thought we had it all figured out back then and didn't need to listen to older and wiser expats when they gave us advice. But with the fullness of time, we now realize that, surprise, those guys knew what they were talking about. So we thought it would be fun to revisit some advice that was given to us in our early days that we ignored, but now looking back, we realize probably would have saved us a lot of headaches. Well, Ed, this show was your idea. I think it was a great idea because I think when you're trying to fit into a place and find your groove and find what level you're going to settle at, you meet a lot of people and you ask a lot of questions, and inevitably you get a lot of advice. So,
True that. Well, first I want to clarify something. The idea for this show comes from my good friend Stan, who I want to give a shout out to. Stan, this is a great topic. I was basically hanging out with some of my friends back here, and I was lamenting how you and I are often, but not always, struggling for show ideas because the podcast is so old. And as everyone knows, we really do 2 shows per week. And my buddy said, hey, what about advice you didn't take? And the reason he said that is that he gave me some advice that I did not take.
He's still bitter about it. So he's like, oh, how about a show about this thing that you ignored?
That's right. That's pretty much what's going on. But I got to admit, I just got to plead guilty in this case. So I don't know. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, we've each got two things that we've reached back into the cobwebby past inside of our brains in our early days. So yeah, we each chose 2 things that we wish we would have listened to a bit more closely back in the day. So sure, it's your idea. Actually, it's your friend's idea, but you brought it up. So I'll let you take the first one.
Okay. Actually, the advice my buddy Stan gave me, I'm going to talk about second because it's a little bit deeper and more complex. So the first example of advice that I did not take but should have is going to come from a mutual friend of ours, a guy named Brian, who is now back in the States now with his beautiful wife and 2 children. And I met Brian my first week in Bangkok, and we actually had an extended chat. I think he had already been in Thailand for a couple years, and we had an extended chat. He gave me a bunch of good advice, and luckily I did follow some of it. But he gave me this advice, and I've always regretted not doing it. He said to me, dude, you're in a totally new environment and situation, and the bottom line is, you're going to forget a lot of your initial impressions. So you should keep a daily journal of all the stuff you're seeing for the first time and how it makes you feel and what you think about it. And I remember Brian saying that he regrets not doing that. And he can't remember. Back then he was like, look, I can't even remember what it was like those first couple months. He's like, dude, so you got to get on this. You got to make notes like right now. And I remember thinking like, that is great advice. Like I wasn't resisting. Yeah. I'm like, that's genius. I'm going to do that. And then I didn't do it.
This is fantastic advice. I know Brian, and he's a very wise guy, and anything he says is generally worth taking to heart. I wish I would have done this too. And I did sort of do it because when I came over here, I had the impression that everyone back home, all my friends and family back home, would be just waiting with bated breath for the latest update from Greg in Thailand, this exotic faraway land. And so I started a little website, but back then it was hosted on another, like it was just like some big website / Greg in Thailand or something like that. And I would spend hours every day updating the site that got probably 3 views a week.
Well, that's cool. So it sounds like you kind of did it. So you have a record of your early days.
I did, but they only exist in like I copied the text and I pasted it in some prehistoric version of Microsoft Word and I printed it out. So they exist as printed out pages with the margins of each on the side of each page cut off. So I'm missing like 2 words on each line from the left and right side. They're really hard to read, but they're there. But
no, man,
I wish I would have done it more completely.
Damn it. That is such good advice that Brian gave me. And so I'm just telling all of you newbies, you should take notes or write stuff down or have a blog. I know a lot of people today, they do have blogs, but it's such a good thing to capture your first few weeks or first few months in Bangkok or Thailand. Yeah,
it's amazing. Trust me, when you've been here 5, 6, 8, 10 years, you're going to look back through the old pictures and be like, why did I take a picture of this stupid thing? What's the story behind this? You're going to forget.
That's right.
And unless you have, a companion writing, like, oh, I went out to this crazy club tonight with this person and this person. Yeah. You're going to forget the names. You're going to forget the places, and you're going to forget a lot of it. So it's super good advice.
Okay, man. What's yours?
Well, mine was something that I ignored and I regret doing, and it comes back to haunt me to this day. And this is a bit of advice that our friend and previous guest of the show, our friend Derek Van Pelt, he was a guest on season 5, episode 16. He said to me, I also met Derek in my very early days here, and he said, you know what you should do? He said, get a map of Bangkok, a big map of Bangkok, as big as you can find, and put it on your wall. And whenever you're going somewhere, whenever you're heading to a party or a bar or a thing or someone's house or a school or work or whatever, he's like, go to the map and look where you are and look where you're going. And he's like, it'll take some time, but after a while, you're going to get very familiar with the layout of Bangkok, the names of the roads and how all of the highways connect and things like that. I was like, yeah, that sounds like a really great idea because I'm new here. The city's confusing as hell and I need to sort it out. Of course, just like you, I went home and immediately forgot to do it. And dude, I drive my car, but like we've talked about before on the show, without Google Maps, I'm hopeless. I don't know what highways connect to what
Oh,
roads and
wow.
what overpasses touch down where. And if I get into the back of a taxi, like we've all had the experience where we look up halfway through the ride and you're like, I have no idea where I am.
That's right. That's right.
What's around me.
Well, Derek is another one of those old wise men who's got incredible advice just about life in general, but definitely about Thailand. And that's actually a great piece of advice, because Thailand and Bangkok, it's just really confusing. It's we've talked before about how it's an unplanned city. There are very few right angles, at least in important places. The river is like curves like a snake, and it throws everything off.
Right.
I never have any idea what's north, south, east, or west when I'm in Bangkok. I have no idea. So yeah, getting a mental picture, having that map on the wall. Damn, that was I've actually never heard that before. That was good advice.
Yeah, and on top of that too, like all of the district names and the road signs, they all talk about stuff that is not only unfamiliar to us, but it's in a different language. So you're like, am I going to Bang Ke? Am I going to Bang Wa? Am I going to Bang Na? Am I going to Bang Chapa Chapa?
That's
whatever.
right. That's right.
You know,
That's right.
It's really easy to be like, I don't know if that's the bigger district or a smaller district or the name of a shopping mall. I don't know.
To be honest, dude, now that I've heard this advice, I think I need to do this now.
Yeah, I guess it's never too late, right? Like the Chinese proverb, right? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today.
That's right. I might do that. I might get a big map, and I think that's really good advice. Okay, my second piece of advice from my buddy who thought of the idea for this show. I think on the surface, it's a bit controversial, but I have decided over the years that this actually was genius. So my buddy had already spent a year in Japan, so he had been in Asia. And back then, in the 90s, this was shocking, that I had a buddy who lived in Japan for a year. It was just
insanity.
Yeah, it was total insanity. And then subsequently, I told him I'm coming to Thailand. I had a one year teaching contract, and he said, "Look, dude, you're going to meet a lot of people over there. You're going to meet a lot of girls. This might sound weird, but exercise some discipline, exercise some self-control, and don't start dating a girl for at least 6 months."
Ooh, that's interesting. What was his rationale?
Well, a couple points. The first thing is that I didn't think I was even going to make 1 year. That's the irony of my intro to the show. So I got my company to agree to let me go after 6 months. That's how silly. That's how I did not know myself. So they agreed to let me go after 6 months. So I updated his advice to 3 months. So when I touched down, because I thought I was only going to be here 6 months or be in Bangkok 6 months, was okay, I'm not dating anyone for 3 months.
Okay.
His rationale basically was that it's a different culture, it's a different situation. We all know that there's a weird dynamic going on between. Oh, actually, it's just in relationships. So when you drop down in a new culture, it's just the whole dating scene is different, and there's different motivations of people. And we've talked before about how Thailand, in a way, is kind of a nerd heaven. In that, back home you might not be able to get a date, and all of a sudden you show up in Thailand and some cute girl wants to go out. And he just basically said, "Look, dude, the girls are going to be there 3 months down the road. So there's no reason you don't have to jump in the swimming pool like the day you show up. You don't have to just go bonkers.
Right.
Just chill out." And he's just saying, meet people, get to know people, develop some street knowledge of how things actually work, and it'll keep you from making dumb mistakes. And the bottom line is you can still meet a great girl later. And here's what actually happened. So when I showed up, I was totally planning on following this advice. I'm like, okay, boom. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to meet people. This is going to be crazy, but no dating, no girlfriends for 3 months. This was my total plan. Here's what actually happened. Okay. On the first day I woke up, a guy who worked for my company knocked on my door to take me to our company. So it's like day one, I wake up, knock, 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 meet a guy I never met before, and we go to the company. I spend all day at the company, have lunch with people, meet all these people, and then, at 4:30, he's like, "Dude, let's go out to dinner. I'm going to take you around." So this is day one. I'm like, "Cool."
Nice.
He takes me to dinner in Nana Plaza at Woodstock.
Oh God.
Okay, so Woodstock, it was an awesome bar in the middle of Nana Plaza that had killer American food, and inside Woodstock itself, it's a normal bar with great music, famously great jukebox, like killer. So it's just an awesome bar with awesome food. But in Nana Plaza, of course, there's all these go-go bars, which I did go to, but that was not the problem. The problem was that in Woodstock, we started to chat with all the waitresses in there, and he's telling them like, "Oh, he just got here today," so I'm like the new Farong, I'm like the new guy.
God.
And the waitresses are cute, of course. And then so we ended up going around to go-go bars like on day one, thanks to my buddy who I met, who I became friends with. Day one, he's like, "Dude, you got to do the important cultural things in Thailand, like go to these go-go bars, So I'm not even there 24 hours. It hasn't even been 24 hours yet, right? Right.
Yeah.
So we go back to Woodstock and hang out, and then the waitresses, their friends showed up. Like their friends from school. And I met a really cute girl, Greg.
Oh, did you? And
she was very cute.
I imagine you clicked immediately culturally, and
we connected. Like
no
her name was Dao, and we exchanged phone numbers. I got her phone number, and my second day in Thailand, I called her up and asked her out to dinner. And my third day in Thailand, we had dinner, and she brought a friend. So we've talked about this before. So it was one of my early lessons, and then we started dating.
Oh, and did it work out all right?
It was interesting. I would say it was. I don't regret doing it per se, but I think it put me on this road. Like the bottom line is, it went okay, but it immediately thrust me into. It thrust me into the world of dating, and it basically was unbroken. So it's like I dated her for a few months, and she was now with more wisdom, I realized she was kind of a unique girl because she had been previously married to a Spanish guy and had traveled around the world. So she was a little bit worldly, but that guy that she had been married to had money, and she was definitely looking for someone to take care of her. So she was very nice and very sweet, and there was no scamminess involved. But after dating her a couple of months, I realized like she needs like someone like who's going to take care of her.
Not me.
Yeah, she needs not me. But while I was dating her, I towards the end of that, I met another girl, and who I started dating. As soon as Dow and I broke up, I started dating this girl, Anne, and I dated her for 3 years. So it's like I basically had my first 3 days in Thailand without a girlfriend. That's it.
This is really good. And again, I never was told this, and I wish I would have, because I'm not going to go into too many details, but my first job in Thailand, I was still very, very fresh, and I immediately started dating another teacher at my school, a Thai lady who was a teacher at our school. And she was very sweet and very nice and very down to earth. But I was just not prepared for the cultural differences, the language differences, the workplace differences. Like, oh my God, I worked at an all-girls high school. Can you imagine the gossip about one of the new Farang teachers dating one of the other Thai teachers? Like, I just was not prepared for it. And again, we went on a date, and she brought her friends, and I was completely confused. I was way over my head, man, and I needed more time to get familiar with all of these little cultural quirks that I just sort of stumbled through while trying to build a relationship, which was, in retrospect, probably not a great idea.
The fact that I jumped into the dating pool, it didn't lead to anything really bad, but I didn't have breathing space. I didn't have that feeling of freedom in Thailand just to go here and go there as a single guy or with friends and just meeting people. And the bottom line is I chose to be in those relationships, and they were great. These were great women. And I, especially with my second girlfriend, I felt like I was in love, and maybe I was on the road to marriage. So it didn't lead to anything tragic, but the bottom line is Stan was right. Like, I think I would have, if I had 3 months of just learning a little bit of Thai, talking to more people,
right.
Like knowing what it's like to be single there. I don't know. I think I should have followed that advice.
Well, we've all got a limited amount of bandwidth, right? And when you're new to Thailand, you're a lot of that bandwidth is taken up with just trying to figure out the basics, right? Where am I? How do I order food? What's going on here?
That's right.
And you just add the relationship conundrum to that whole thing, and it can be overwhelming.
Yeah, it was overwhelming. So I should have followed his advice. Let's just say that.
Good advice. Good one. Good one. All right, my number 2. Someone told this to me, and I thought it was silly advice because obviously I was young and excited and I wanted to party a lot. But he said, if you have a chance to live sort of out in the suburbs in Bangkok, away from the main drag, where all the foreigners, settle when they first get here. And I was like, I don't know about that. I mean, I kind of like living here. My friends are all here and stuff. And then I told him where I worked, which is way up on Samsen Road near this intersection called Bangkok. And he's like, dude, why are you living? I was living on Thong Lo. He's like, why are you living on Thong Lo? Because check this out. This was my commute every morning. I would get on a motorcycle along Thong Lo. I would ride up to Thong Lo BTS. I would take the BTS to Ratchathewi Station, just one stop past Siam Square. I would then get on the number 16 bus, wait for 15 minutes before the bus came or whatever, get on the bus and then ride for like another 30 or 40 minutes to my job. And I did that every day, twice, going and coming back.
That is brutal, man.
It was brutal. It was brutal. And he's like, why don't you move closer to your job?
Right.
Like, it's ridiculous that you do this every day. And I was like, oh, well, my friend, I know like 7 people and they all live in this area and I kind of want to stay close to that. I wish I didn't. I wish I took that advice. I would have probably made a lot more Thai friends, local friends. I would have got to know a different area of Bangkok much better. I would have been able to sleep in longer in the morning. And I think just in the long term, it would have put me on a better footing to really understand the quote unquote real Bangkok. Because
I think this is
Thong Lo, Sukhumvit, etc., like that. It's a bubble. It's an expat bubble.
I was just going to say this is good advice to get you out of the expat bubble. Now, I'm not someone who hates the expat bubble. I live in the expat bubble. I like it. So I have
Right.
I have good friends who are expats, like awesome friends. But I think the way to really enjoy your life as an expat is to be able to walk in both worlds, to be able to hang out in a Thai neighborhood or a Thai restaurant, have enough Thai that you don't feel weird being there. So this idea of living in a Thai neighborhood, this is great advice, man, because the bottom line is the expat world is always going to be there.
Exactly. Right. And of course, the Thai world is always going to be there too. But I mean, my Thai would have been better. I would have been forced to use it every day a bit more. And I would.
No, I think the problem is when you get used to the expat bubble, then 5 or 10 years later, it's already in a way it is too late. I mean, obviously the Thai neighborhood is still there, but you just get used to the comfort of the expat bubble and just hanging out with all your Farang friends, and then boom, 10 years goes by.
Right. And I would get on the bus and the SkyTrain every day and I would go up there and I'd do my job and then like, okay, I'm done. Go home, back to my bubble. And I would get back down there and see my friends, but I would have had a much more interesting base to build my life on if I had lived a bit out of these bubbles. So
agree 100%, dude.
Not only that, the worst thing was riding the bus and taking the SkyTrain, that whole commute. This was pre-iPhone, pre-Facebook and iTunes and all that stuff. You know how rough it is going that far on a commute with like a Linkin Park CD in your Discman?
That is so funny.
It's awful.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. And I mean, besides the whole Thai cultural thing, the bottom line is commuting sucks. So it's just good advice from a logistical standpoint.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think those are 4 pretty good bits of advice that we got that we ignored and wish we hadn't of.
Right.
So because of our mistakes in the past, listeners, perhaps you can learn something from that. I really sound like I'm talking to my son right now. Like, trust me, buddy, 10% of every paycheck, you got to put that away, which is what I wish I would have listened to my mom when she told me.
Well, anyway, just because we screwed up, it doesn't mean our listeners have to.
That's right. So please, follow our advice. Of course, you are free to ignore it just like we did. But I'm willing to bet that in 10 years, you're going to go, man, I should have listened to those 2 dudes on that podcast.
That's right. For sure.
And listeners, if you have any bits of advice that you would wish you had given your younger self back in the day when you first got here, or had got from other expats, other friends you met when you first got here, and you didn't listen but wish you did, hey, let us know. Send us a message. It'd be interesting to hear what you think. All right, let's get into love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something that we just have to learn to live with no matter how we feel about it. The last time I asked Ed what he thought of noisy Chinese dragon dances, so this week it is Ed's turn.
All right, dude. So this is a very general thing, but I'm sure you're gonna know what I'm talking about. Now I'm gonna use a Thai phrase now. So all listeners, please ignore my horrible Thai and my bad tone. But Greg, what is the phrase in Thai? Bakwan. What does that mean?
Literally speaking, it means sweet mouth.
Yeah. So
And
what does it generally refer to?
it's like when you say something like, "Oh, your tie is really good," or you look fantastic today. You're like, "Oh, bakwan." It's sort of like saying, "Oh, you." No.
Yeah.
No, stop.
So what I want to ask you about is like I guess in English the best way to phrase it would be like Thai flattery. There is this tendency for me. I always associate it with Thai girls because, as you know, Thai women are just famously cute and they can be very sweet. And they in certain situations, like my students do it, is they just say like super sweet things to me, like, "Oh, Achan, you look so good today," or something like that. And I know it's bullshit. I know it's bakwan. And I was just wondering, how do you react to this kind of like, I guess in English we just call it sweet talk or something. How do you like, in a way it is insincere in a way, but it's also just really cute. Like, what's your take? What's your take?
I think there's different levels. Like, it could be considered sweet talk, or you could be considered like brown nosing or ass kissing, depending on the context.
Yes.
In which it's used, right? I don't mind it at all. In fact, I hardly even notice it. I think there's probably enough of it going on in Western cultures as well, when you want to give someone a compliment or something like that. So it's never tripped me up. I've never really noticed it as something that's worth, like standing out to me. So
interesting.
No, I think it's fine.
The reason I brought this up is because our buddy John, who has been a guest on the podcast, at least on the Patreon episodes, he has also taught at my university, and it drove him crazy when these girls would come up to him and like push their hair back behind their ear and go like, John, like, can I turn my paper in late? Oh, by the way, you look really good. You look really good today.
Oh God.
Like it drove him crazy. And so he would always call them on and be like, "Look, I know what you're doing. Like, stop with this sweet talk."
I was going to say, drove him crazy, like he put his fist in his mouth, like, or drove him crazy, like, stop trying to seduce
me. I think he even talked about this a little bit, maybe when he was a guest on the Patreon episode, the bonus episode, but it kind of drove him crazy because he saw it as like insincere or fake or something. But I got to say, I'm with you, man. I'm a sucker. Like, it just works. It just works for me. So I might even have to go love. I'm just a sucker for it, and it's just so sweet.
No.
Like that sweetness, that Thai sweetness. Even though I know it in at least some cases is insincere, it just works. It just works on me.
It's so funny. I can totally see John, if someone does that. I can see him going, "I know what you're doing, and stop it." But I would say love too, because whenever I meet a friend's mom, I'll automatically turn to the friend and go like, "Oh, you didn't tell me you had a sister." I mean, it's the lamest, most pathetic flattery, but it always gets a like, "Oh."
That's right. It works.
It always works. It works.
So you engage in bakwan.
Yeah, well, I don't have any hair to push back behind my ears, so I have to resort.
But you
to
do
just
have a cute face, Greg. Come on, let's be honest.
I do, and I can work it to be ab bow. I put my two fingers up to my cheek like a little tee. Anyway,
like an Instagram post.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't bother me. I think it's a cute little cultural quirk.
Cool. We're on the same page. Okay,
Yeah.
So as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'd like to say thank you to Christine Howes for lending us her support at the show Shadow level. And Greg, what did you find out about Christine?
Well, Ed, Christine is from Australia, which, as you know, is a gigantic country. And we sent a few nice messages back and forth. Actually, me and Christine have been talking for a long time on Twitter, but she only recently became a patron. So that's very nice of her. And she is actually a journalist. So the email that she sent me was was very succinct and cogent. So I'm actually just going to read the email she sent to me. But I think it's quite interesting because she gets up to a lot of driving in Australia, which, as we know, ain't the most exciting place to drive in because it's mostly flat and dusty. So she said, I'm a freelance journalist who has listened to most of the Bangkok podcasts while driving around remote areas of the Cape York Peninsula, the pointy bit. Fun fact, most of my drives are the same length as the width of Thailand at its widest point and back again, which I Googled.
Wow. That's a long ride.
Yeah. So you have kept me awake and therefore alive on miles and miles of completely unpopulated corrugated dirt roads, for which I'm very grateful. My brother moved from Bangkok back to Brisbane, Australia, just yesterday, and we're all wondering how he will go back in the sleepy sunny coast after the fairly wild ride he's been on in Thailand for the past 15 years. He might even be back. I would certainly love to be back. I first went to Bangkok in 2012, and being completely focused on visiting my brother, did not expect to fall head over heels in love with such a vibrant, colorful, and yummy city. I've been back 3 times since and love every minute of it. The river markets at Don Wai would be my favorite place to visit anywhere. So there we go.
That's a great message.
It is. She specifically gave us plaudits for keeping her alive and therefore awake. I think that's high praise.
The Bangkok podcast saves lives.
It sure does. And, I can really identify this because we've all seen what it's like driving across Australia, but Canada is much the same. Like, there's stretches of Canada across the prairies where it's actually really dangerous to drive because it's just flat and straight for hundreds and hundreds of miles. And it's easy to doze off and just get so bored that you fall asleep. And then pretty soon you're driving off the shoulder into a wheat field or a bunch of rocks or who knows what else. So it's dangerous.
No doubt for sure.
And also, because Christine does so much driving, obviously professionally and successfully, if she comes back to Thailand, I think we just have to sort of assume that she's going to be our chauffeur, driving us around Bangkok safely and with all speed.
Yeah, for sure. Agreed.
Cool. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you very much, Christine. That was great. A final thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website. And connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
That's right. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube, send us a voicemail online that we'll use on the show, or even reach out to me directly on Twitter where I am BKK Greg. So thanks for listening, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll see you back here next week.
For sure.
Yeah.
By the way, my mom has started listening to the podcast now.
Oh, really?
And I was having lunch with my mom and 2 of my sisters, and I said, "All right, your homework is to watch the 10 Thailand America differences. Your homework is to listen to that episode and give me feedback." Okay.
Okay.
So we go have lunch, and sister number 1 gives me some really interesting feedback on the show. Sister number 2 gives me some really interesting feedback on the show. And my mom goes, "You said shit twice and damn once." That's it. That was her. She listened to the whole show. That was her. "You said shit twice and damn once."
I think she doesn't listen to the bonus shows.
No, I'm like, "Mom, you cannot become a patron."